You're listening to the Little Green Cheese Podcast, episode 84. Well, welcome back, curd nerds. I'm Gavin Webber, and this is where you can learn about cheese making home. Well, it's been a long time in between episodes. I know. But for those of you who have been watching the YouTube channel, Little Green Cheese Podcast with Gavin Webber, then you would have only just finished episode 83, which was released all on the 12th. It's now the 14th of June at the time of this recording. So you would have gone, oh, there's been no interruption. But those who listen to the audio-only podcast would have seen an interruption of about, I think about a year and a half. So sorry about that. But yeah, there's been a lot of things going on in our lives. For those who don't know, Kim, my lovely wife who helps me with the YouTube channel, got diagnosed with breast cancer. And yes, it seems like a bit of a shock, but, you know, we're well into it. She's actually finished her chemotherapy treatment. She's finished, hopefully, her last surgery, which is fantastic. And once we get the results back next week, that everything's okay, then we will be... Well, I'll be taking her to radiotherapy, which is, it happens every day of the week, except for weekends. So 5 days a week for 5 weeks, and she gets some radiation therapy, and that's supposed to kill any remnant cells. So hopefully that's all good, and we aren't going to be having too many problems in that department anymore. It's been a very stressful time, as you can imagine, for our family, but, you know, what can you do? Life goes on. And even with COVID-19 hitting us as well, you know, Kim's immune system's been very low. And, if she catches it, the chances aren't good for survival. I know that sounds a bit harsh and a bit grim, but that's just the state of how it is. So Ben, who's my son who lives at home, myself, and Kim have all been trying to avoid catching COVID-19. We've been in self-isolation since the first few outbreaks here in Australia, which thankfully they've locked down all the borders and all that sort of stuff, and there's been very little cases here in our country. So hope you are well, and everything's been going okay for you and yours since the last podcast episode. Anyway, that's a little bit of what's been going on in our world. Obviously, cheese making has been happening at the same time. I've been making lots of interesting cheeses, been all very good fun. And you would see that on my regular YouTube channel over at Gavin Webber. You just go and search for Gavin Webber over on YouTube, and you'll see my main channel that has all the cheese stuff, which is very cool. Anyway, let's get on with the news. So today's news is from, where's it from? miragenews.com. I think it's an independent news thing. Anyway, so it was dated on the 4th of June 2020, and the title is Family Business Feeds Australian Cheese to Save an Iconic Industry. So let me just read a bit out. It's quite good on a really quick transition to save some artisan cheesemakers. So it says, today is National Cheese Day, and people all over Australia are celebrating by supporting small artisanal cheesemakers who have taken on big retailers and revolutionised selling food online since COVID forced them to rally. Many cheesemakers in rural areas were already reeling from impacts of the bushfires when coronavirus hit in March and saw shops and towns close. No longer able to sell from their own door, several traditional cheesemakers feared losing everything and laid off staff. It goes on to say a tiny cheese company in Queensland called Cheese Therapy came to the rescue and to date has sold 12 tonnes of cheese online and shipped it all over the country to cheese lovers from the Northern Territory to Tasmania. Dairy Australia has never seen such huge quantities of cheese sold by any company, let alone online. Partners Sam Penny and Helen Shadforth founded Cheese Therapy 5 years ago from home, delivering artisanal cheeses made by traditional cheesemakers to fill a gap that big bland supermarkets overlooked. Sam says National Cheese Day is ideal for starting a revolution, rallying cheese lovers to back made. I'll start that again. Rallying cheese lovers to back handmade Australian cheese by buying it direct. Today is a real call for arms for cheese lovers to support this small but vital industry. Cheese making is a centuries-old craft, but they were at the mercy of the big retailers and mass distributors until now. Anyway, it goes on to say that there's been many artisan cheesemakers who have been using the Cheese Therapy platform to distribute their cheese. In fact, one cheesemaker, master cheesemaker Barry Charlton, lives at Fish Creek, South Gippsland in Victoria, and his tiny team creates a range of award-winning handcrafted cheeses that are vegetarian-friendly, using only non-animal rennet. Barry says, we usually make 10 to 14 vats a week, and now we are just making 2 and operating only 1 day, so I had to let everyone go. About 99% of my cheese was going into food services. We supplied 4 airlines, cruise ships, and other stockists that have all closed recently. Work just evaporated, and it was suddenly dire straits, Barry said. Without Cheese Therapy and the tireless work of Sam and Helen, we'd have no choice but to close our doors. They're helping us stay afloat and sane too. I'm now looking at introducing a new cheese that will help other local farmers as well. We're not throwing in the towel that easily. It goes on to say that in 1 day we sold 400 kilograms of cheese and sales keep growing. We've seen a doubling in sales each week. I'm scrambling to employ new staff, lease new warehouses, overcome delivery problems, and I've begun to give free webinars for Dairy Australia to help cheesemakers set up the direct sales, Sam said from Cheese Therapy. So that's fantastic. I really do think that's a great thing that Sam and Helen did to get artisan cheesemakers out of the red and still making cheese during the COVID-19 crisis, or pandemic, as I should call it. Anyway, that is a good news story. Certainly hasn't stopped me making cheese during this period as well. Anyway, let's have a listen to some listener questions. So the first question today is from Adam.
Hi, Gavin. This is Adam from California. When making a bloomie rind cheese, would it help to add a little bit of the mold cultures into the salt when salting them?
Well, Adam, thanks for your question. Should we add some culture when salting? No, we shouldn't. Normally, when you make a bloomie rind cheese, you add the Penicillium Candidum or Geotrichum Candidum or both into the milk as the initial inoculation. And then if worse comes to worse and you don't see a bloomie rind, the bloom start to happen within 10 days, what you can do is you can put a bit of PC and GC, or Penicillium Candidum and Geotrichum Candidum, into a spray bottle with some non-chlorinated water. Give it a shake, let it sit in the fridge for a day to rehydrate properly. Give it a good shake and then just gently mist that over your cheeses. And then they will start to grow the bloomy rind. Don't add it with the salt. It's probably not a good idea of smearing it all over the surface. It's probably best if you mist it, and that's the way I've seen it being done and have done it myself to recover or to save a bloomy rind cheese. Anyway, I hope that answers your question, Adam. Thank you very much. Next question is from John.
Hey, Gavin. This is John from Vicksburg, Michigan. I just had a question about after the curd sets. Does it mean anything if you remove the lid and look if there's like a half inch of whey over top of the curd? I mean, the curd seems to be set, but there's all that extra whey already. I was just wondering if and what that may mean anything. Appreciate all you do. Take care.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for your question. It doesn't really mean anything. I've seen that before. So half an inch is about 1.25 centimetres. And I've seen that before when I have let the curds set for about an hour. You didn't mention which cheese you were making, but I think that is okay. I've seen whey sitting on top. And in fact, in some of the videos that you've probably seen on the channel, on the Gavin Webber cheese channel, then yeah, you would see that there is whey sitting on top. It's especially the case after you've cut it and let it rest. Once you've cut the curd and let it rest for the 5 minutes to heal, then definitely there's at least half an inch, 1.5 centimetres of whey sitting on the top. And that obviously that's from cutting the curd and it releases a bit of whey before you start stirring. And then once you start stirring, more whey gets released. But it's not uncommon to see it sitting on top once the milk has coagulated into curds. Anyway, thanks for your question, John. Next question is from Miguel. Okay, here we go.
Hi, Gavin. Miguel Zalapa. I've been following you for a little while now and love your videos. Mate, I was just watching you with your Petite Blue series, and the way you were draining them in your two little containers. What I'd like to get my hands on, I've just sent you a separate email on, is those little draining racks that you have inside your plastic containers. I'm wondering whether you sell them. I'm sure I could pick them up somewhere, but I'd just as soon get them from you than anywhere else. Do you have any of those plastic racks that I could stick in my plastic containers to keep the cheeses off the out of the way when they're sitting inside and resting? That's the nature of my inquiry. Thanks.
Well, Miguel, yes, no problems at all. We do have those for sale. We've got, they're called cheese drying mats, I think, online. If you go to littlegreenworkshops.com.au, which is the shop that Kim and I run, and there's a big cheese making section there. And yeah, you'll find them there. Also, if you are stuck for that and you don't live in Australia where we're currently shipping, then what you can do is get bamboo sushi mats, and they will do the same thing. So you just put two sushi mats on top of each other in the plastic box, and you'll find that there will be no issues whatsoever with draining. So you can use bamboo sushi mats to the same effect. But yes, we do have the plastic drying mats that I also use for air drying the cheese after it's come out of the mold. So yeah, you can do that. No problems at all. What I will do is I'll put the link to the drying mats in the show notes. Thanks for your question, Miguel. Next question is from Ruth. Here we go.
Hi, Gavin. This is Ruth calling from San Francisco, California. I hope you and Kim are doing okay. I'm so excited about the podcast going live that I wanted to make sure and send in some questions. I have two questions today. One of them is, I'm very thrilled that Steve Benz made me a couple of custom curd harps for my new 20-liter pot. And here's my question. The wires on this curd harp are aluminum. And I heard you say in one of your podcasts that aluminum is a reactive metal. And I'm wondering if the curd harp will have any problems well, if I will have any problems using the aluminum curd harp in my milk, or if the fact that you don't leave it in the milk very long means it'll be okay. So I wanted to check with you about that. And my other question is about early blow. I had an experience a while back where I made a beautiful batch of Monterey Jack cheese, and I made the mistake that everybody tells you not to make, that, I just ignored the reality and went ahead and I made sourdough bread the same day I made that Jack cheese. And so for the first time ever, I got an early blow. And I didn't know what it was initially, so I had to do some research to figure it out. Then I realized that was what I had. Anyway, I went ahead and put the Jack cheese in the cave. It went back down to size, and when it got back down to like the regular size it was supposed to be, doesn't feel particularly light. It shrank back down. I waxed it, and now I've got it aging in the cave. And it's, pretty much regular, normal size that it would be. And I'm wondering if I have to worry about it. It's got a few months to go, but just wondering if it's okay to eat, even though originally it had that early blow. I don't really understand that well about what early blow is and if it's always a bad thing. So those are my two questions, and I cannot wait to hear the podcasts as they become current. I've been listening to them all, and I love them, and I learn a lot from them, and I'm happy to have them to tide me over during the week between the live streams. So I will see you this afternoon on the chat. Okay, thanks, Gavin. Bye.
Well, thanks for your lovely long question and the wonderful words of appreciation. Thank you, Ruth. I really do appreciate it. Okay, on with your questions. So the first one was around aluminium wires in your curd cutter. Now, I do say don't use an aluminium pot because it is reactive, as you stated. Indeed, it'll make the milk, when you heat the milk, it'll make it taste metallic. You'll get a slight metallic tang. I have experienced that personally, and it wasn't nice. There was a metallic tang in the cheese, very ordinary sort of stuff. What you can do, though, is when you're using, well, hopefully you'll use your normal stainless steel pot, and that'll be good. The aluminium wires are only touching the curd for, less than a minute tops. So I don't think there'll be any issue with using aluminium wires within the curd harp. Ideally, he should really be using stainless steel. And the wires that I saw, I think he sent me one as a sample. That was Steve Benz, of course. And the link to the curd harps will be down in the description below or in the show notes, depending how you're listening to this. So it should be stainless steel, really. But if he's using aluminium, that's fine, as long as it's easy enough to clean. So it shouldn't be too much of a hassle. But yeah, you won't get that metallic taste. It's only when the milk's been sitting in there for a long time, heating up, where you'll get a metallic taste, and the acid from the curds start to, not eat, but I suppose eat at the walls of the pot. So the second question you had was early blown. Now there's two types. There's early blown by a organism called coliform, which occurs in raw milk occasionally when the raw milk is contaminated. And you can tell what that looks like is if you look at the curd before you've pressed it or just had it sitting resting there, it looks very sponge-like. This happens really quickly. And it can also happen during pressing. And if you cut into the cheese, it looks like a sponge. It looks like little tiny holes all the way through it. And that cheese is contaminated and you should not eat it. Now, what you mentioned was that it may have been contaminated by yeast from sourdough bread. So that's a yeast early blown infection. So there's two types: there's coliform and yeast. The yeast one, not so bad, but if you pressed it and it settled down a bit, you may get some funky tastes in your cheese. So that may be a bit of an issue as well. But if you're absolutely sure and you used pasteurized milk when you made the cheese and you made sourdough at the same time, then it's pretty likely that it's going to be a yeast infection and not coliform, which is a bacterial infection. So it may be safe to eat. You'll have to check it once it's mature. If it tastes funny and stinks, smells, then the nose knows, so throw it away. But you won't know. But what you could do, a suggestion is to cut the cheese in half, have a look at it, see what it looks like. If it's got tiny little holes all the way through it, then it's probably the first type of infection, the coliform, so I would throw it away. If it's got larger holes, then it's probably a yeast infection from the sourdough yeast. And that's the type of early blown. If it smells funny, then get rid of it. All right, thanks for your question, Ruth. I appreciate it. The next question is from Sandi.
Hello, my name is Sandi. I'm in Reno, Nevada, out in the US. And I'm calling because I would like to see if there's a way that you could possibly show how to convert an old fridge into a proper cheese cave. I talked to my husband about it, and he seems to be kind of overwhelmed by the prospect. He thinks that because we live in an apartment, we don't have a garage, we don't have tools. He thinks there's going to be special tools needed to do that. So if you could possibly put together a video that shows that talks about step by step how to do it, the tools needed, the equipment needed, that would be totally awesome. So I've never made any cheese, and I want to. And I want to be able to make cheeses like cheddar, Gouda, Munster, and all of these things require a cheese cave, which I don't have. So I would love a video on that if you possibly could. I also have questions about making cheese, but I guess I'm going to have to, maybe got time here. When you start out with large quantities of milk, what if I don't want huge wheel of cheese? What if I only want to make a pound of cheese at a time, or maybe 2 pounds of cheese at a time? How would I make? How do I convert your recipes so that I end up with no more than 2 pounds of finished product of cheese? Because it's a little overwhelming. 10 gallons of milk, that's a lot of milk. And how big utensils do you need? I'm trying to find a cheese press also that doesn't cost several $100s. That's so far all I've found is a cheese presses that cost several hundred or a couple $100s. So if you could point me in a direction where I can find some inexpensive cheese presses, that would be awesome. And cheese molds and all the stuff that you need for making cheese at home. Okay, well, thank you very much, Gavin. And bye.
Well, thanks for your question, Sandi, or many questions. So we'll start off with the first one, and that's the cheese fridge. Your husband can relax. It's very simple. There is a video. If you go to my YouTube channel and look for the cheese fridge, you'll see that all I do is I use a normal dorm fridge or bar fridge, whatever you want to call it, small one that fits underneath a bench. And what I do there is I've connected an external thermostat. So the external thermostat was very cheap, I think it was less than $50 Australian, which is about, 40, maybe $35 US. And you plug the fridge into the socket on the external thermostat. You plug the external thermostat into the wall socket, and you put the thermostat lead. I just put mine through the seal on the door, didn't drill anything, just put it hanging over the top, and then tied it onto one of the racks, so it just dangles freely and there's no cheese touching it or anything, and set it up for 13 degrees Celsius. And what happens is the external thermostat, when it gets too hot or too cold, it turns the fridge on or off as required. So no drilling. You don't have to drill holes through the side of the fridge for any probes or anything like that. You just simply plug the fridge into the external thermostat, plug the external thermostat into the power outlet, and put the probe, which is on a big piece of wire, really long. I think it's about 2 meters long, the one I've got anyway, and you pop it through. So go and check out that. I'll put the link to the cheese fridge video into the show notes, and you can check that out. Okay, next question was around large batches. I think you might have got mixed up. I only make 10-litre batches, which is 2.5 gallons. Okay, 10 litres is about 2.5 gallons. And it creates about maybe 2.2 pounds of cheese. That's it. So all the recipes that I've got on my YouTube channel, bar a few of the smaller ones, is roughly I start off with 10 litres. I think that's appropriate for a home cheese maker. It makes about 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of cheese. So you don't have to worry there at all. Now, if you want any of the equipment, then you can pop over to littlegreenworkshops.com.au, which is run by Kim and myself. And we don't sell internationally at the moment, unfortunately, but we sell Australia-wide. And once the global postage crisis is over, after COVID-19 settles down a little bit, then we'll restart shipping internationally. The reason why we had to stop shipping internationally was because Australia Post, who is our international shipping partner, has ceased picking up from our premises. And unfortunately, I can't afford to go to the post office and get infected. So therefore, we did have everything set up for contactless pickup, which our couriers still do. They never stopped. But Australia Post, in their wisdom, decided to stop picking up from our premises. So unfortunately, we had to turn off international shipping. Bit of a pain. Anyway, that's what you can do. And thank you, Sandi, for asking your questions. The next question is from Soren. Very short and sweet, this one. Don't miss it.
Hello. Is it possible to add rum or whiskey to a cheese, and in case, what cheese?
Very short question. Thank you, Soren. But yes, very good one. Yes, you can add rum or whiskey to cheese. Now, the type of cheese is usually in the cheddar style, so it has to have fairly large cheese cubes or curd cubes before you press it. Very similar. If you go and have a look, there's a video that I made called Stout Cheddar, and uses the same sort of process. So just omit the stout and put in whiskey or rum, and you simply soak the curds before you press in whatever alcoholic liquid you like, and it'll be absolutely fine. I think I soaked it for about 2 hours in there, and they knitted together lovely. The flavour was very subtle, but it was delicious, and it didn't overpower the cheese. I think the cheese that I used was a cheddar style, or it could have been it wasn't stir curd. It was a cheddar style cheese. Yeah, definitely cheddar style, because I had to go through the cheddaring process, and I had to cut the curd slabs into fingers, and then into, I think it was about 2-inch by 1-inch cubes, or 5 centimetre by 2.5 centimetre cubes, which worked absolutely perfectly. Then soaked them in the alcoholic liquid, drained that off, and then pressed it as per normal, and that worked fine. Well, hopefully that answered your question, Soren, and thanks for sending it in, and thank you to everybody who sent in questions this week. I've looked in my voicemail queue, there are literally hundreds of voicemails that I haven't got to in the last year, And I apologise, I don't answer them straight off the bat because a lot of people send in things, ask questions when they're making the cheese and want me to answer them straight away. Unfortunately, I don't have the time or the resources to do that. So I will be answering any voicemail questions that you leave over at littlegreencheese.com, which is where you can submit your voicemail question. I'll say that again, littlegreencheese.com, and you can submit your question there. There's a little tag on the right-hand sidebar of the web page, or you can go to the contact page and leave a voicemail there. Works very well, and I'll pick those up and pop them into an episode. Anyway, thanks for listening this week. It's been absolutely fantastic. Keep those questions rolling in. I do appreciate those. I'll put the link to the question. It's called Speak Pipe, and we'll put that in the show notes and the description on the video version. You can learn about cheese making at home over at my Curd Nerd Academy. And the link to that will be in the description below. You can also buy my ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese, The Beginner's Guide to Cheese Making at Home, over at littlegreencheese.com or littlegreenworkshops.com.au. You can find all my video tutorials over at YouTube. Just search for Gavin Webber or go to cheeseman.tv in your browser and you'll get whisked away there. You can get all your cheese making supplies over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au. Well, thanks for listening, Curd Nerds, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Little Green Cheese Podcast. During this podcast, you heard royalty music by Kevin MacLeod. I played Malt Shop Bop, the news theme, and Call to the Dairy Cows. See you later, everybody. Or hear you later.